Jung's model of the psyche relied on two personality attitudes, introversion and extraversion, four modes of orientation, functions, thinking, sensing, intuition, and feeling, two of which are rational judging functions, thinking and feeling, and two of which are irrational perceiving functions, intuition and sensing. Introversion focuses on the inner world, extraversion on the outer world. Jung wrote, "Introversion is normally characterized by a hesitant, reflective, retiring nature that keeps itself to itself, shrinks from objects, is always slightly on the defensive and prefers to hide behind mistrustful scrutiny. Extraversion is normally characterized by an outgoing, candid, and accommodating nature that adapts easily to a given situation, quickly forms attachments, and, setting aside any possible misgivings, will often venture forth with careless confidence into unknown situations. In the first case obviously the subject, and in the second the object, is all important. All scientists are, in this sense, extraverts. Their attention is always directed to objects in the world, sensory things, and they more or less deny the reality of subjectivity and self-directed mental activity. In other words, they are people of matter, bodies, not people of thinking, mind. This is what defines scientists. Their scientific method starts with the body, not with the mind. They begin with their bodily sense organs, not with their intellect. To any intellectual, that's an absolute red flag right there. The intellect has already been relegated to a secondary status. The body is what is important to science, which is why it has no definition of the mind. Science is inherently anti-intellectual because it is inherently anti-mind and pro-body. Intellectuals deal with concepts. Scientists deal with percepts, and that enormously shrinks their capacity for intellectual activity. No intellectual is ever impressed by the sheer lack of interesting concepts in science. In many ways, science is an exercise in anti-thinking. At all times, it privileges physical observation. Empiricists always begin with the body and dismiss the mind as a blank canvas, which gets populated by physical experiences. Rationalists always begin with the mind and assign it a vast amount of innate knowledge, which is hidden in the unconscious and needs to be brought into consciousness. Thanks to science, empiricism, the physical, is totally in the ascendancy in the academic world, which is therefore anti-intellectual. Thanks to ontological mathematics, rationalism, the mental, is destined to take over from empiricism and create an intellectual world. It's humanity's destiny to become a species of the mind, despite science's mission to imprison it in the body. Science wants us to be objects. Ontological mathematics knows we are subjects. Ontological mathematics is compatible with Gnosticism, which saw the mind as something trapped in the body. Science, in Gnostic terms, would be considered a prime tool of the demiurge to keep us trapped in the hell of matter and never realize our true spiritual nature. The demiurge, the false god, is a scientist. Abraxas, the true god, the hive mind made of all monadic mental subjects, is an ontological mathematician. Gnostics are always people of knowledge. They are rationalists. Scientists are anti-knowledge insofar as they oppose reason and logic. They are empiricists, materialists. Their knowledge, such as it is always led by percepts, not concepts. They are always locked into the world and can never transcend the world to reach the highest truth. To the Gnostics, the scientists are in fact fellow travelers of the pistics, the people of faith, equally opposed to knowledge, reason and logic. Scientists are hilics, somatics, unenlightened people of the body, opposed to the mind, wholly alienated from their true selves. They are lost souls. A person's preferred function, their conscious function, is the superior function. Their least preferred function is used unconsciously. It's the inferior function and is always the opposite of the superior function. The inferior function represents a person's unconscious or repressed behavior. For Jung, the opposite of thinking is feeling, and the opposite of sensing is intuition. Jungian psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz wrote, In the realm of the inferior function there is a great concentration of life, so that as soon as the superior function is worn out, begins to rattle and lose oil like an old car, if people succeed in turning to their inferior function they will rediscover a new potential of life. Everything in the realm of the inferior function becomes exciting, dramatic, full of positive and negative possibilities. There is tremendous tension and the world is, as it were, rediscovered through the inferior function. That's why the most logos-oriented person should never turn their back on mythos. Why is the academic world so dull? It's because the autistic mandarins banish fun from academia. For some reason, they can't bear it. They don't have the intellectual confidence to expect their students to grasp the difference between logos and mythos. Jung described 2 of the 4 mental functions as rational, or judging, and 2 as irrational, or perceiving. Thinking is rational via the logical discrimination it affords. Jung believed that feeling is also rational because it can discriminate by means of evaluating our instantaneous reactions in terms of liking or disliking whatever is presented to us. Any kind of evaluation, leading to judgment, renders a function rational. Sensing and intuition are not rational because they do not involve any evaluation, discrimination, judgment. They merely collect data. A secondary process must then process the data, assess the data, interpret the data, place a value on the data and then execute a judgment or decision concerning the data. Science believes everything is about experiments, observations and measurements. In fact, these are merely data collection activities. Science doesn't become powerful until it applies secondary processes, especially those of mathematics, to the collected data. Science believes it's a perceiving subject. In fact, it's a judging subject. It values and judges everything according to its irrationalist paradigm of materialism and empiricism. It rejects everything to do with idealism, rationalism, conceptualism, nominalism, universalism, hidden variables, and the ontology of mathematics. It's sad that science is so lacking in self-awareness. What it imagines it is isn't what it is. Sensing and intuition are called irrational functions because they do not depend on any kind of logic, either cognitive or emotional. They simply perceive what is apparent to them, to be more exact. Sensing is directed at the external spatial world, while intuition is directed at the internal world of time, non-locality, synchronicity, possibility, the unconscious, everything that the senses don't deal with. Jung wrote, "Sense perceptions tell us that something is. But they do not tell us what it is. This is told us not by the process of perception, but by the process of apperception, the act of the mind by which it becomes conscious of its ideas as its own, self-awareness, and this has a highly complex structure. Not that sense perception is anything simple, only, its complex nature is not so much psychic as physiological. The complexity of apperception, on the other hand, is psychic. Perception concerns sentience. Apperception is about consciousness. These are very different things. Animals, which are sentient, do not know what anything is. They lack consciousness. They have to react to the world instinctively. They cannot react to it using conscious knowledge, which would allow them to overcome their default responses supplied by instinct. In Leibniz's system, some perceptions are brought into consciousness, but most are not, they remain in the unconscious. Leibniz said, "It is good to distinguish between perception, which is the internal state of the monad representing external things, and apperception, which is consciousness, or the reflective knowledge of this internal state, something not given to all souls, nor at all times to a given soul. It's not enough to perceive, you must apperceive. Percepts must be handled conceptually. In the absence of conceptualism, they are necessarily reacted to instinctively, unconsciously." Fritz Lewton wrote, Jung distinguishes active from passive apperception. In active apperception, the ego grabs hold of something new and comes to grips with it. In passive apperception, the new content forces itself upon consciousness, either from outside, through the senses, or from within, the unconscious. Apperception may also be either directed or undirected. Jung said, in the former case we speak of attention, in the latter case of fantasy or dreaming. The directed processes are rational, the undirected irrational. Scientists have never grasped that the senses do nothing but deliver information to the mind, but it's the mind that then processes it and makes it into knowledge. The mind applies an interpretive framework to things and converts mere subjective impressions into items of reflection. An animal can look at the color red, subjectively experience the color red, but not be conscious of it. It is perceiving it, but not apperceiving it. It is merely sentient of red. Apperception is about framing perceptions via a secondary process of language. A human being can say, I am looking at red. I really like red. I much prefer red to blue. I love it when my girlfriend wears red. I'm going to buy her a red dress. No animal ever has any such thoughts. Even when animals are having sex, they are bored or indifferent. They do it because of instinct. They don't fantasize about it, as humans obsessively do. Animals don't have sexual taboos. That requires consciousness. The waking mind is primarily about active apperception. The sleeping mind switches to passive apperception. In your dreams, you are not in active control. You are passively reacting to the content being served up by your unconscious. Jung said, the essential function of sensation is to establish that something exists. Thinking tells us what it means, feeling what its value is, what it's worth, and intuition surmises whence it comes and whither it goes. We have a sense of its possibilities. Empiricists are those who believe we need the senses to tell us what exists. In fact, the senses only tell us about appearances. They never tell us about essences. Science is a subject which is all about sensible appearances and ignores intelligible essences. In rationalism, thinking tells us what exists, and also assigns a value and meaning to it and passes judgment on it. Intuition tells us what we can do with it. The senses and feelings, by contrast, are completely deceptive. They place us in Maya, the world of illusions. They trap us in the physical world, the phenomenal world of appearances. They make us prisoners of the matrix.